Last Sunday, my 13-year-old daughter said something at dinner that left my mother-in-law speechless and my marriage hanging by a thread. I'm Maya. And what happened that night changed everything I thought I knew about courage, family loyalty, and the price of keeping the peace. You know that feeling when you're walking on eggshells around someone, constantly measuring your words, second-guessing yourself until you barely recognize who you've become? That was my life every Sunday for the past 15 years. Every single week, I'd sit at my mother-in-law Patricia's perfectly polished dining room table, bracing myself for whatever criticism she'd disguise as helpful advice. But this particular Sunday was different. This was supposed to be a celebration dinner for my daughter Emma, making honor roll again. She's always been brilliant, this kid of mine. Sharp as a tack with eyes that see everything, even the things adults pretend aren't happening. At 13, she's got more backbone than I ever had at twice her age. My husband Ryan, well, he's the kind of man who'd rather disappear into his phone than deal with conflict. 36 years old and still seeking his mommy's approval like he's 6? Don't get me wrong, I loved this man once. Maybe I still do. But somewhere between his mother's constant undermining and his complete inability to stand up for me, that love got buried under years of resentment and exhaustion. Then there's Patricia herself. 62 years old, silver hair always perfectly styled, never a wrinkle in her blouse or a dish out of place in her kitchen. She's the kind of woman who prides herself on being old-fashioned, which apparently means it's her God-given right to judge every choice I make as a wife and mother. In her world, real women cook from scratch, keep spotless homes, and never complain about sacrificing their own dreams for their families. And David, my father-in-law, bless his heart. 64 years of letting Patricia run the show has turned him into a professional head nodder. He's not a bad man, just one who learned long ago that agreeing with his wife is easier than dealing with her wrath. I work full-time as a marketing coordinator, which means I'm juggling client deadlines, campaign launches, and conference calls while trying to be the perfect mom to Emma. Some weeks, that means grabbing pre-made meals from the grocery store or, God forbid, using the microwave to heat up leftovers. In Patricia's book, this makes me lazy, selfish, and completely unworthy of her precious son. The thing is, I used to fight back. I used to defend myself. Explain that working mothers make sacrifices, that love isn't measured in hours spent over a stove. But Ryan's silence during those battles wore me down. Every time I'd look to him for support and find him staring at his plate instead, a little piece of my spirit cracked. So I learned to smile and nod. I learned to let her passive-aggressive comments roll off my back. I convinced myself I was taking the high road, being the bigger person, keeping the family together. What I didn't realize was that Emma was watching every single interaction, absorbing every moment of disrespect I accepted, learning that this was normal. That Sunday started like all the others. Patricia's house smelled like her famous pot roast, the table was set with her good china, and I could already feel my shoulders tensing as we walked through her front door. Emma looked beautiful in her new dress, excited about sharing her honor roll news with her grandparents. Ryan was already checking his work emails before we'd even sat down. I had no idea that in less than 2 hours, my daughter would say something so brutally honest, so perfectly aimed, that it would shatter the careful pretense we'd all been maintaining for years. I had no idea that the dinner meant to celebrate Emma's academic achievement would become the night she taught our entire family what real courage looks like. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why Emma's words hit like a lightning bolt, you need to know exactly how we got to that moment. You need to understand the years of subtle warfare, the death by 1,000 cuts that happens when someone slowly erodes your self-worth while everyone around you pretends not to notice. Let me paint you a picture of what my life looked like in the weeks leading up to that explosive Sunday dinner, because context matters when you're trying to understand how a 13-year-old girl ended up being the bravest person in the room. It was one of those particularly brutal October weeks at work. 3 major clients were launching campaigns simultaneously, which meant I was pulling 12-hour days, living on coffee and determination. By Thursday, I'd already ordered pizza twice and grabbed rotisserie chicken from the grocery store for another dinner. Emma never complained. She's always been understanding about Mom's crazy schedule, but I could see Patricia's future criticism forming like storm clouds on the horizon. Friday evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Looking forward to celebrating Emma's wonderful achievement Sunday. I'm making my special pot roast, the one that takes all day to prepare. See you at 4 sharp. The passive aggression was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Patricia never just sent simple invitations. Every message was carefully crafted to remind me of her superiority in the homemaking department. Ryan read the text over my shoulder and actually smiled. Mom's pot roast is amazing. Emma's gonna love having a real celebration dinner. The word real hit me like a slap. As if the dinners I worked exhaustedly to provide for our family weren't real enough. As if love could only be measured in hours spent marinating meat and chopping vegetables. I wanted to say something, to point out how his mother's text was designed to make me feel inadequate, but I'd learned from experience that Ryan would just say I was being too sensitive. She's just excited to celebrate Emma, he'd insist, genuinely, believing his mother's intentions were pure. After 15 years of marriage, I'd realized that Ryan had developed selective blindness when it came to his mother's behavior. That weekend, Emma and I went shopping for a new dress for her celebration dinner. She picked out this beautiful navy blue dress with tiny silver stars on it. She said it made her feel confident and grown up. As we stood in the dressing room, she asked me something that caught me completely off guard. "Mom, why does Grandma Patricia always seem mad at you?" My heart clenched. I'd thought I was hiding the tension better than that. "She's not mad, sweetheart. She just has very strong opinions about how things should be done." Emma looked at me in the mirror with those wise 13-year-old eyes. That's not the same thing as being nice, though. Out of the mouths of babes, right? I realized in that moment that no matter how hard I tried to shield Emma from the family drama, she was absorbing every interaction, every slight, every moment of disrespect that I accepted in the name of keeping the peace. Sunday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. Ryan was already in good spirits, humming while he got dressed. "Mom texted that she's been cooking since 6 this morning," he announced proudly, as if his mother's dedication to elaborate meal preparation was somehow a personal accomplishment. I stood in front of my closet staring at my clothes like they held the answers to life's biggest questions. What do you wear to your own execution? I finally settled on a simple black sweater and jeans, something that wouldn't give Patricia additional ammunition about my appearance or effort level. As we drove to Patricia's house, Emma chattered excitedly about her grades and her upcoming school projects. Ryan nodded along, but kept checking his phone at red lights. I gripped the steering wheel and tried to psych myself up for another afternoon of subtle warfare disguised as family dinner. "Remember, sweetheart," I told Emma as we pulled into Patricia's perfectly manicured driveway. "Today is about celebrating your hard work. Try to focus on that, okay?" Emma nodded, but I caught her studying my face in the rearview mirror. She could sense my tension, my preparation for battle. This beautiful, brilliant girl was learning to read the emotional temperature of every room she entered, and that broke my heart more than any criticism Patricia could dish out. Walking up to that front door, I had no idea that this would be the last time I'd enter Patricia's house, as the woman who accepted disrespect for the sake of family harmony. I had no idea that my daughter had been quietly building up her own arsenal of truth bombs, just waiting for the right moment to deploy them. The moment we stepped through Patricia's front door, I could smell trouble brewing along with that famous pot roast. Patricia greeted us with her signature smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes when she looked at me. "Maya, dear, you look tired. Long week at work again." The concern in her voice was about as genuine as a $3 bill. "Just the usual busy schedule," I replied, forcing brightness into my tone. "But we're so excited to celebrate Emma's achievement." Patricia's attention immediately shifted to Emma, and her whole demeanor transformed. "There's my brilliant granddaughter. David, come see how beautiful Emma looks." This was Patricia's pattern. Shower Emma with genuine affection while treating me like an inconvenient accessory to her son's life. David emerged from the kitchen, dish towel in hand, beaming at Emma. "Congratulations, sweetheart." "Honor roll again. We're so proud of you." At least David's kindness toward Emma was authentic, even if he was completely useless when it came to reining in his wife. We settled around Patricia's dining room table, the one she'd inherited from her mother and polished religiously every week. The good china was out, the crystal glasses sparkling, fresh flowers arranged just so. Everything was perfect, calculated to remind me that this was how a proper home should look. Ryan immediately started praising the spread. "Mom, this looks incredible. You've outdone yourself." He was practically glowing with pride, as if Patricia's cooking skills somehow reflected well on him personally. "Well, you know how I feel about family dinners," Patricia said, settling into her chair with the satisfaction of a queen surveying her kingdom. "There's nothing more important than gathering around a table with a home-cooked meal made with love." And there it was, the first shot fired. The emphasis on home-cooked and made with love wasn't accidental. I felt Emma glance at me, already picking up on her grandmother's subtle dig. As we started eating, Patricia launched into her usual performance. "Emma, sweetheart, tell me about school. Are you still enjoying your advanced math class?" She was genuinely interested in Emma's achievements, which made the contrast with her treatment of me even more painful. Emma brightened, launching into stories about her latest projects and her favorite teachers. Patricia listened attentively, asking follow-up questions, praising Emma's intelligence. For a few minutes, I almost relaxed. Maybe today would be different. But then Patricia's focus shifted, as I knew it inevitably would. "You know, Emma, I was just telling Mrs. Henderson next door about your honor roll achievement. She mentioned that her daughter-in-law has been struggling to balance work and family. It made me think about how challenging it must be for working mothers these days." My stomach tightened. Here we go. "I mean, when I was raising your father, I never had to worry about shortcuts or convenience foods. I planned every meal, shopped for fresh ingredients, spent hours in the kitchen. Of course, I didn't have a career pulling me in different directions." She said career like it was a dirty word. Ryan nodded along, completely oblivious to where this was heading. Mom always made everything from scratch. I remember coming home from school to fresh-baked cookies. "That's because I understood that taking care of my family was my priority," Patricia continued, her voice sweet as poison. "I believe that when you truly love someone, you make sacrifices. You put in the real effort, not just the convenient effort." I felt my face growing hot. Emma had stopped eating and was watching the exchange with increasing tension. David kept his eyes on his plate, pretending not to notice the undercurrent. "Different families have different circumstances, Patricia," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice level. "What matters is that families spend time together and support each other." "Oh, absolutely," Patricia agreed, with false enthusiasm. "I'm not criticizing anyone's choices. I just think it's important to maintain standards. After all, the way to a man's heart has always been through his stomach, not through a microwave timer." The words hit like a physical blow. She'd basically just called me a failure as a wife in front of my daughter and husband. I looked desperately at Ryan, waiting for him to say something, anything to defend me or shut down his mother's attack. But Ryan just kept eating, his eyes fixed on his plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating, while Patricia watched me with triumphant satisfaction, and Emma's grip tightened on her fork. The silence after Patricia's microwave comment stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond to being publicly humiliated at what was supposed to be my daughter's celebration dinner. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. I had a choice to make, and I had about 3 seconds to make it. I could explode, call Patricia out for her years of passive-aggressive attacks, demand that Ryan finally grow a spine and defend his wife, make a scene that would traumatize Emma and give Patricia ammunition for months. Or I could do what I'd always done, swallow my pride, take the high road, and hope that somehow my dignity and Emma's peace of mind would survive intact. Looking at Emma's face, I made my decision. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and anger, and I realized she was learning a lesson I desperately didn't want to teach her, that women should accept disrespect in silence, that keeping peace is more important than standing up for yourself. I forced my mouth into what I hoped looked like a gracious smile and set down my fork with deliberate calm. "Well, Patricia," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside me, We all have different ways of showing love for our families. I think what matters most is that we're here together, celebrating Emma's hard work and achievements. It was my olive branch, my attempt to redirect the conversation back to Emma and away from Patricia's need to diminish me. I was giving Ryan one last chance, one final opportunity to step up, support his wife, and show our daughter what a real man does when someone attacks his family. Patricia's smile turned predatory. She sensed weakness the way bullies always do. Oh, of course, dear. I wasn't criticizing anyone personally. I'm just old-fashioned, I suppose. I believe that when you truly love someone, you put in the effort. Real wives understand that a man's heart is reached through his stomach, not a microwave timer. She said it again. The same cutting remark, delivered with even more venom this time because she knew she could get away with it. She knew Ryan wouldn't stop her, and she was savoring every moment of my humiliation. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, hoping against hope that this time would be different. This time he'd see what his silence was doing to our marriage, to our daughter, to the woman he'd promised to love and cherish. I willed him to look up from his plate, to meet my eyes, to finally choose his wife over his mother's approval. Instead, Ryan actually nodded slightly and said, "Mom's pot roast really is amazing. Nobody makes it like you do, Mom." That's when something inside me finally broke. Not broke like shattered glass that can be swept up and forgotten, but broke like a dam giving way after years of pressure. The realization washed over me with crushing clarity. My husband would never defend me. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. After 15 years of marriage, I finally understood that in Ryan's world, his mother's feelings would always matter more than his wife's dignity. I felt Emma's eyes boring into me, and I knew she was seeing it too. The exact moment when her mother stopped pretending that this marriage was worth fighting for. The moment when I finally understood that all my patience, all my attempts to be the bigger person, all my hopes that Ryan would eventually choose our family over his mother's approval had been naive fantasies. David continued staring at his plate like it might spontaneously combust if he looked up. After 30-plus years of marriage to Patricia, he'd perfected the art of selective deafness and strategic blindness. He'd probably convinced himself that if he didn't acknowledge the cruelty, it wasn't really happening. But Emma wasn't having it. I watched my 13-year-old daughter's jaw clench, watched her small hands grip her fork until her knuckles went white. The expression on her face was one I'd never seen before. Not just anger, but a kind of righteous fury that scared and impressed me at the same time. Patricia was still basking in her victory, probably already planning her next attack, when Emma slowly pushed back her chair and stood up. The scraping sound seemed unnaturally loud in the suddenly tense room. The moment Emma stood up, something electric charged the air. Patricia's triumphant smile faltered slightly as she looked up at her granddaughter, clearly expecting some polite excuse about needing the bathroom or getting more water. David finally looked up from his plate, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Ryan stopped mid-chew, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. But I knew. Looking at Emma's face, the set of her jaw, the fire in her eyes, the way she held her shoulders back with a confidence I'd never managed to muster in this house, I knew my daughter was about to change everything. Emma picked up her plate with deliberate care, as if it were made of the finest crystal instead of Patricia's good china. The simple action somehow felt ceremonial, loaded with meaning that made everyone freeze in anticipation. She looked directly at Patricia, and when she spoke, her voice was crystal clear and absolutely fearless. "Well, Grandma Patricia, this meal tastes like love, which is more than Dad's ever given Mom." The words hit the table like a bomb. Patricia's mouth fell open mid-bite, a piece of pot roast literally falling back onto her plate. David's water glass stopped halfway to his lips. Ryan's fork clattered onto his plate with a sound that seemed to echo forever in the sudden, absolute silence. But Emma wasn't finished, not even close. "Mom works all day at her job, then comes home and takes care of me, helps with my homework, drives me to soccer practice, comes to every single school event, and yes, sometimes she uses the microwave because she's exhausted from taking care of everyone else. But Dad..." Emma's voice grew stronger, more confident with each word. Dad just sits there and lets you be mean to her, over and over again. That's not love, Grandma. That's being a coward. I felt my heart stop and restart. My 13-year-old daughter had just said everything I'd wanted to say for 15 years, but never had the courage to voice. She'd cut through all the polite pretense and family politeness to expose the raw, ugly truth that everyone had been dancing around. Patricia's face went through a fascinating transformation, shock melting into outrage, her carefully composed mask slipping to reveal the cruel person underneath. "How dare you speak to me that way, young lady? I have been nothing but loving and generous to this family." "Loving?" Emma's voice rose with incredulous anger. "You spend every dinner making Mom feel terrible about herself. You criticize everything she does, everything she cooks, everything she wears, and Dad just sits there nodding along like some kind of puppet." Ryan finally found his voice, but instead of the defense I desperately hoped for, he turned his anger on our daughter. "Emma, that's enough. You do not speak to your grandmother that way. Apologize right now." And that's when I saw it, the exact moment Emma's childhood faith in her father died. The moment she realized that even when she was defending her mother with the kind of courage he'd never shown, Ryan's first instinct was still to protect Patricia's feelings over his own, family's dignity. Emma looked at her father with a mixture of disappointment and disgust that made my heart break. "Apologize for telling the truth? Apologize for saying what you should have said years ago?" "You're being disrespectful and hurtful," Ryan stammered, looking desperately between his mother and his daughter, like a man caught between two burning buildings. "No, Dad," Emma said, her voice now calm and devastatingly clear. "What's disrespectful is letting someone treat your wife like garbage for 15 years. What's hurtful is choosing your mommy's approval over your family's happiness. What's really sad is that your 13-year-old daughter has to teach you how to be a man." The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. David sat frozen, probably wishing he could disappear into his chair. Ryan's face was red with shame and anger, though I suspected the shame was overpowering the anger, even if he wasn't ready to admit it. Emma set her plate down gently and looked around the table at each of them. This was supposed to be a celebration dinner for my honor roll achievement. Instead, it turned into another episode of "Let's make Mom feel worthless." Well, I'm done watching it happen. She turned to me, and in her eyes I saw not just my daughter, but the woman she was going to become, strong, fearless, unwilling to accept disrespect from anyone. Emma's final words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. For a moment, nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then Patricia pushed back from the table so violently that her chair scraped against the hardwood floor like nails on a chalkboard. "I will not be disrespected in my own home by a child," she declared, her voice shaking with rage. "David, we are leaving this table. I refuse to sit here and be attacked by someone who clearly hasn't been taught proper manners." She stormed toward the kitchen, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. David, ever the obedient husband, mumbled something about cooling off and followed her, leaving the three of us alone at that perfectly set table with its crystal glasses and fresh flowers, all of it now feeling like props in a play that had gone horribly wrong. Ryan sat there for a long moment, staring at his plate like it might provide answers to questions he wasn't ready to ask himself. When he finally looked up, his eyes went straight to Emma, not to me. "Emma, you owe your grandmother an apology. What you said was cruel and inappropriate, regardless of how you feel about adult situations you don't understand." That's when I finally found my voice. Adult situations she doesn't understand? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. "Ryan, she understands perfectly. She's been watching you fail to defend your wife for years. She's been learning that this is what marriage looks like, one person attacking while the other stays silent." "Don't turn this around on me, Maya. I'm not the one who just traumatized my mother." Emma laughed. Actually laughed, a sound so bitter it didn't belong in a 13-year-old's mouth. "Traumatized her? Dad, she's spent years traumatizing Mom, and you've been her accomplice." That word, accomplice, hit Ryan like a physical blow. I watched him flinch, watched the truth of it settle into his features. But instead of acknowledgement, instead of the apology I'd been waiting 15 years to hear, he doubled down. You're both being dramatic. Mom was just trying to help. Stop. Emma's voice cut through his excuses like a blade. Just stop. I'm 13 years old, and I can see what you can't. Or maybe you can see it, and you just don't care enough to fix it. The drive home was silent except for the sound of Emma crying quietly in the back seat. Not the tears of a child in trouble, but the heartbroken sobs of someone who just watched their hero fall off a pedestal. Ryan drove with white knuckles, jaw clenched, staring straight ahead. I spent the 20-minute drive staring out the window, finally understanding that my marriage had been over for years. I'd just been too afraid to admit it. That night, after Emma went to bed, Ryan and I had the conversation I'd been avoiding for half our marriage. He wanted me to call Patricia and apologize for Emma's outburst. I told him that our daughter had more courage in her pinky finger than he'd shown in 15 years of marriage. He said I was being unreasonable. I said I was finally being honest. We started marriage counseling 3 weeks later, but the damage was done. How do you rebuild trust with someone who's shown you repeatedly that your dignity means less to them than their mother's approval? How do you teach your daughter about healthy relationships when she's watched her father choose cowardice over courage for her entire life? The counseling helped, but not in the way Ryan hoped. It helped me understand that I deserved better. It helped Emma process her feelings about watching her parents' marriage implode. And eventually, it helped Ryan understand that silence in the face of cruelty makes you complicit in that cruelty. 6 months later, Ryan finally stood up to his mother. He told her that her treatment of me had been unacceptable and that it needed to stop. But by then, it was too late. The woman who had spent years swallowing her pride to keep the peace was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and wouldn't accept anything less than respect. Emma learned the most important lesson of all from that Sunday dinner. Sometimes the adults in your life will fail you, and when they do, you have a choice. You can stay silent and become complicit, or you can find your voice and speak your truth, even when it's terrifying. Today, Emma is 16 and fearless. She knows that love isn't about perfect pot roasts or keeping the peace at any cost. Love is about showing up, speaking up, and refusing to let the people you care about be diminished by others. And sometimes, love means a 13-year-old girl teaching the adults in her life what courage actually looks like. That Sunday dinner changed everything for our family. It taught me that sometimes the smallest person in the room can have the biggest impact when they refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice. Emma showed me that real love isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about protecting the people who matter most, even when it's uncomfortable. If you've ever found yourself in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and standing up for what's right, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Have you ever had someone unexpected come to your defense? Or maybe you were the one who found the courage to speak up when no one else would. Your story could inspire someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics or relationship challenges. Sometimes we all need to be reminded that we deserve respect and that staying silent doesn't actually keep the peace. It just enables the wrong people. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Every share helps these stories reach people who need them most. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about family, relationships, and finding the courage to stand up for yourself. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to stay silent when it matters most.